I suggest you combine it with the welcome statement in the Nuclear Posture Review. Perhaps some of you noticed this. Here's what the Nuclear Posture Review released by the U.S. this spring said. It is in the U.S. interest and that of all other nations that the nearly 65-year record of nuclear non-use be extended forever. Well, I say amen to that. Extended forever. The most fundamental implication of the review conference is the imperative of humanitarian nuclear disarmament through fulfillment of the NPT disarmament obligation. Humanitarian disarmament is a phrase that has been used in connection with the bans that just over the past 15 years have been established on cluster munitions and landmines. But it's a phrase that deserves to be used in the nuclear context as well. So the Red Cross has recognized this implication. It stated that preventing the use of nuclear weapons requires fulfillment of existing obligations, that this is the NPT they're talking about, to pursue negotiations aimed at prohibiting and completely eliminating nuclear weapons through a legally binding international treaty. The International Court of Justice also effectively recognized the implication, I'm talking about the implication from the incompatibility of nuclear weapons with international humanitarian law, implication that it leads to the prohibition of nuclear weapons. The ICJ effectively recognized the implication when it unanimously declared the obligation to pursue in good faith and bring to conclusion negotiations on nuclear disarmament. The court additionally noted that the pattern until now has been for weapons of mass destruction to be declared illegal by specific instruments, citing the Biological Weapons Convention and the Chemical Weapons Convention. So that brings us to a second result of the World Court Project, which is the Model Nuclear Weapons Convention. After the ICJ opinion was delivered in 1996, many of the people involved in the civil society campaign in support of getting the opinion then went to work on drafting a model convention. A leader in this effort was Peter Weiss, and Ed Aguilar also worked on it. I don't know if there's anybody else in the room who worked on it. I personally was not at the Lawyers Committee at the time. Well, what is a nuclear weapons convention? It's a treaty prohibiting and eliminating nuclear weapons with declarations of facilities and materials, inspections, a disarmament agency, provisions for individual criminal responsibility, etc. So in 1996, the Lawyers Committee on Nuclear Policy, IAWANA, IPPNW, and the International Network of Engineers and Scientists Against Proliferation convened a working group charged with drafting a model convention. They met repeatedly over a period of several months, and their purpose was to produce a document not that would per se become a treaty, but that would demonstrate that a treaty is feasible. It was released in April 1997, and at the request of Costa Rica became a UN document. It was also explained in the book Security and Survival, entitled Securing Our Survival, in its 2007 second printing. And I have a few copies of those for sale out on the literature table. A revised version of the Model Nuclear Weapons Convention was released in 2007, and it was again distributed to UN member states at the request of Costa Rica and Malaysia. In October 2008, and this was a signal event in this campaign, UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon said that in fulfilling the NPT disarmament obligation, states should consider negotiating a convention, and he said that the model convention provides a, quote, good starting point. So, like international humanitarian law, the Nuclear Weapons Convention appeared in this year's NPT final document. At the conference, the Non-Aligned Movement, 116 countries of the Global South, led this year by Egypt, put forward a plan for global elimination of nuclear weapons by 2025, with a convention entered into force by 2020. Also importantly, 28 governments in their individual statements called for a convention. This included countries of the South like Algeria, Indonesia, Mexico, Philippines, but also some new players from the North, Austria, Norway, Switzerland. Many governments also supported identification of timelines and benchmarks, not just principles and objectives, as NPT conferences had mostly adopted in the past. So there's an interesting history to the way this was negotiated in Main Committee 1 on Disarmament, which could involve all of the governments who were there for the review conference, well over 100. The first draft report, it was chaired by Ambassador Marschak of Austria, called for the Secretary General to convene a conference in 2014, quote, to consider ways and means to agree on a roadmap for the complete elimination of nuclear weapons within a specific time frame, including by means of a universal legal instrument, that is, a nuclear weapons convention. So that conference could have been a launching point for negotiations. Now, 4 of the 5 nuclear weapon states, NPT nuclear weapon states, France, the UK, the United States, and Russia, made it clear that if the conference was going to yield a consensus document, this would have to be watered down, and it was. So in the agreed final document, the conference convened by the Secretary General in 2014 had disappeared. But reflecting the strong drive of the majority of the world's countries and also a strong global civil society drive that included some 17 million signatures on petitions gathered from around the world, reflecting the strong drive of those forces for commencement of negotiations on the convention, the final document includes the following. First, it affirms, quote, that all states need to make special efforts to establish the necessary framework to achieve and maintain a world without nuclear weapons. And it also notes the 5-point proposal for nuclear disarmament of the Secretary General of the United Nations, which proposes inter alia consideration of negotiations on a nuclear weapons convention. So the phrase nuclear weapons convention made it into the NPT final document. More importantly, the review conference clearly acknowledged that elimination of nuclear weapons will require a global institutional and legal system. How am I doing that time?
You're doing pretty well, but we're getting closer.
All right. So let me just make a couple of comments on why we should be concerned about a nuclear weapons convention. Why should we demand the negotiation of a nuclear weapons convention? The simple but profound answer is this. It is the solution adequate to the problem. This is not to diminish the importance of other steps. It is just to say that a legal, institutional, and technical framework for the sustained, verified, and enforceable global elimination of nuclear weapons is what is required to solve the problem. Sometimes you just have to accept the force of truth. Then you have to figure out what to do about it. But the first step for Americans who are in denial about this is just to acknowledge the truth of that statement. Most states in the world already recognize the truth of that statement. And the nuclear weapon states are slowly coming around to acknowledging the logic, even if they are not now ready to do something about it. So I think a good part of our task, a major part of our task in the United States and in the other nuclear weapon states is to start making the conversation about the need to achieve a nuclear weapons convention a major, a central part of our conversation about where to go on nuclear disarmament. Thanks very much.